is Nate Willems. On behalf of the Linn County Phoenix Club, I'd like to welcome you all here. Thank you all very much for coming. I'd like to do some thank yous and recognition of officials, current and former elected officials. First, big thank you to RWDSU Local 110, Roger Grobstich, for allowing us to use the hall. This is our first Phoenix Club event, I believe, in this hall, and it's just another resource that we should be using more and hopefully will in the future. Some of our former elected officials and candidates we have here tonight. We've got former state senator and congressional candidate Bob Rush here.
Let's just stick to the 21st century.
Our former county attorney Harold Denton.
Hey, Harold.
Former Parks and Recreation Commissioner Dan Todd. Former Mayor Kay Halloran. Former state representative from Mount Vernon, Ro Faggy. Former congressional candidate Julie Thomas is here. Our current
And former state representative Robert.
and former state representative Robert Wilson. There is danger in doing the former.
And former
also,
state representative Nate Willems.
Also, current Linn County Chair Brett Nillis is here, Chair of the party. Cedar Rapids City Councilwoman Susie Weinock is here. Cedar Rapids City Councilman Justin Shields is here. Linn County Supervisor Linda Langston is here. And our Cedar Rapids City Council member and the next Lieutenant Governor of Iowa. Most all of you know, but Linn County Phoenix Club has been in existence for about 15 years. We are a state registered PAC. We exist for the sole purpose of raising money to help elect Democratic candidates from Linn County to the state legislature and to the courthouse. And this year, like any other, we have a lot of very competitive races. Already this year, the Phoenix Club has invested in Daniel Lundby's race for state representative in Marion. Daniel's a freshman state rep who probably has a target on his back. The Republicans have made that seat a priority. We have Becky Shoup, candidate for county supervisor, who's running in the big donut-shaped rural county supervisor district. Tough race that she has against the first-term incumbent. And then we have also a rural seat, Christy Keese from Mount Vernon, who came just a little over 200 votes short 2 years ago from getting elected to the legislature, making a second go at it. And then we have a candidate who couldn't be here tonight, but who you all know, State Senator Rob Hogue, that we've invested in already this year. He does have a Republican opponent, and will need your help as well. So that's what we do. That's what, and we're so thrilled to be able to welcome a guest like former Senator Webb to Iowa and to Cedar Rapids that he would come to the Phoenix Club tonight. For those of you who may or may not know, Senator Webb served in the United States Senate from Virginia, elected in 2006, served one term, but he doesn't have a typical politician's bio. He doesn't have a typical politician's resume. Senator Webb was a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, went into the Marine Corps, where he finished first in his class at Marine Corps Officer Basic School before serving as a rifle platoon and company commander in Vietnam, where he was awarded the Navy Cross, the Silver Star Medal, 2 Bronze Star Medals, and 2 Purple Hearts. And then he went on to graduate from Georgetown Law School in 1975. Senator Webb served in a variety of capacities in Washington, rising to become Assistant Secretary of Defense, and then Secretary of the Navy. He has worked also as an author and a journalist as well. Traveling as a journalist, he received an Emmy Award for PBS coverage of the U.S. Marines in Beirut in 1983. He was embedded in Afghanistan in 2004. He wrote the original story and was executive producer of the film Rules of Engagement. Senator Webb has written 10 books, including Born Fighting, A History of the Scotch-Irish Culture, Fields of Fire, widely recognized as a classic novel of the Vietnam War, and I Heard My Country Calling, a memoir of his early life. I'll just make one editorial comment and turn it over here, but a lot of elected officials, lots of people who run for office, they do write books, a lot of them do, but it's not very often you find somebody who writes books about something other than politics and themselves. So we have a great, wonderful background, very interesting man. We're thrilled that you could be here to meet him. Senator Jim Webb.
Much, and I appreciate all of you coming tonight. I appreciate the invitation to be here. Why am I in Cedar Rapids? Because I was asked to come. And, I bring you greetings from Dave Lotzak, who I was campaigning with earlier today, and he mentioned that he had helped create your organization here, so he asked me to pass on his regards. I also like to say, kind of like meeting in the Union Hall. I think I can safely say that I'm probably the only person ever elected to the United States Senate with a Union card, 2 Purple Hearts, and 3 tattoos. I really have had a different journey in my professional life, and I had a lot of people ask me, including people tonight, why I did not run for re-election to the Senate in 2012 after we had, I think, a really good run in the time that I was in the Senate. And if I go back to the time that I left the Marine Corps, I've had 4 different periods where I've come into public service for a while and miss writing, quite frankly, and want to get my independence back, and then go out and write for a while and do some other things and miss leadership, the challenge of leadership, and come back into the government. So I've had 4 different periods where I've been in public service for a while and then left. And when I left the Senate in 2012, we decided, our family decided, just take a year and stay completely away from interviews, op-eds, political events, write the book that I just finished, and then just kind of see what would happen after that. And so my book came out in May, and since then I've been kind of getting back out and trying to help people for this election cycle, and hopefully rejoining the debate that I think we really need to have here in this country. What you're doing here is something that needs to be done nationwide. I think everyone in this room knows how the money in our political campaigns, particularly since the Citizens United decision has just overwhelmed the average person's voice in so many different places. And even at the county level here, what you're doing is so vital to getting our democracy back to where it needs to be. When I decided to run for the Senate in '06, Jessica Vandenberg is here in the back of the room. She was my campaign manager during that campaign. I decided to run for the Senate 9 months to the day before the election. I had no money, no campaign staff. I decided to run against an incumbent who had just received the highest number of votes for president in the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C. And on a good day, we were 33 points behind. We won by about 10,000 votes in the state of Virginia, which is one of 8 million people. But when I look at that, I say we had a journey. They went from 33 points behind to winning an election against a probable presidential contender. And we still, at the end of that campaign, were outspent 2-1. It was a vicious campaign. It's very emblematic of something that you're seeing right now here in Iowa and other places today. But I decided when I ran that I wasn't going to engage in negative politics, that I was going to express my concerns about where the country needed to go, and I was going to stick with that, no matter what else was going on around it. My points were, we have, and they are valid today, we have to reorient our national security policy. We have to restore economic fairness and social justice in this country. And we have to rebalance the relationship between the president and the Congress. It's tilted far too heavily toward the presidency in the aftermath of 9/11. We ran on those issues. People started listening to us. I'm going to explain a little bit more about where my concerns are on those issues. And something really special happened in that campaign. People started volunteering. We won that election because people got out and believed in what we were saying and knocked on doors and visibly showed their support. I think by the end of our campaign, we had 14,000 volunteers in Virginia. And when I look back on this, this was really, it was a victory of ideas, positive campaigning, and of people understanding that we need to change things in this country. The issues that I ran on were the issues that I brought to the table when we were in the Senate. And they convinced me that we can get things going in a place like Washington if we get the right leadership and if we put the issues out and educate people as to why they're important and bring people from both sides of the aisle together. My very first day as a United States Senator, I introduced the GI Bill with the people who've been serving since 9/11. It was an idea that I had been talking about for several years before I even decided to run for the Senate. People kept saying after 9/11, this is the next greatest generation. Well, the logic follows if this is the next greatest generation, why don't you give them the same GI Bill that you gave to the greatest generation? I spent 4 years working as a committee counsel in the Veterans Committee as a recent law school graduate. So after the election was over and before I was sworn in, I sat down with legislative counsel and we wrote this GI Bill, introduced it my first day in office, and we started working from our office from that point forward to build a bipartisan consensus, to get the veterans groups to help us, listen to people, make sure that we would shape this bill in a way that we could get it passed. And we're basically saying, once somebody has stepped forward and served their country in a time that we've seen since 9/11, pay their tuition, buy their books, pay their fees, give them the same chance at a future that the World War II generation had. And we passed that in 16 months. And I'm telling you, it's so logical in retrospect that it's hard to believe that it was not an easy lift. The Bush administration opposed us until the day this legislation passed. Key luminaries on the Republican side, like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, with whom I've worked on a number of other issues, opposed this. They were afraid that if you gave a veteran that kind of an educational benefit, they wouldn't be able to retain people in the military. Now, I spent 5 years in the Pentagon, and my logic was the other way around. You know, if you can tell somebody if they step forward and serve, they're going to have that kind of a benefit, you're going to bring more people in, and that's really what we're able to do. We worked on the Republican side. We got John Warner, who was a senior senator from Virginia, Chuck Hagel, who's now Secretary of Defense, World War II veteran, Vietnam veteran, Frank Lautenberg from New Jersey, World War II veteran on the Democratic side, and myself. The four of us formed a coalition. We pushed that through, and in 16 months we brought the best piece of veterans legislation since World War II through the United States Congress. I'm still waiting for George W. Bush to invite me to the signing ceremony, but in the meantime, 1 billion post 9/11 veterans have been able to take advantage of that bill. I did something else during the campaign because of work that I've done as a journalist and as an attorney in the past, I couldn't help but believe that we have to put on the front burner in our country fixing our broken criminal justice system. I had been the first American journalist ever allowed to report from inside the Japanese prison system in the 1980s, and you could see a system that actually was working. You can't compare Japan directly to the United States, but it was a system that was working in terms of prison administration, in terms of reducing crime, in terms of allowing people to assimilate back into their society. And at that time, the Japanese had half our population, and they had 40,000 people in prison. We had about 600,000 people in prison then. When I started campaigning for the Senate, we had 2.3 million people in prison. A large percentage of them for nonviolent offenses, particularly drug offenses. In 1980, there were 40,000 Americans in prison on drug offenses. By 2009, there were 500,000 Americans in prison on drug offenses. So I started, as I was campaigning in Virginia, which is probably second only to Texas in terms of the lock-em-up mentality that existed at the time. I started saying, we have a broken system. This is not a political issue. It's affecting our entire country. It's affecting lives. It's affecting our economy. We have to have the courage to do something about this. My political advisors, a lot of them were saying, you're committing political suicide here. You don't talk about mass incarceration in Virginia when you're running for the United States Senate. But everywhere I went, people started nodding their heads. And when I got to the Senate, I took that on as one of my principal objectives, to put before the American people the need for us to fix the criminal justice system from point of apprehension to point of reentry. We held hearings from our office. I was on a judiciary committee with about 2.5 years of hearings. We introduced legislation to create a commission, a national commission to bring the best minds in America together to tell us how to fix this broken system. We got the support of Justice Kennedy, Supreme Court Justice Kennedy, the ABA. We met with people from across the philosophical spectrum, organizations from across the philosophical spectrum, 100 different organizations right in our office, all the way from the National Sheriff's Association, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, to the ACLU, the Marijuana Project, the Heritage Foundation. We met with people from across the board. We listened to them, and we brought the issue of criminal justice out of the shadows into the national debate. It's interesting to see now that that's one of the top 3 issues of the Republican Party, when they now have begun to see the harm that this is doing fiscally and to individuals in the country. Of course, the irony was, when I finally got it up for a vote to pass this national commission, $14 million, one helicopter, to bring the best minds in America together for an 18-month sunsetted commission, not something that would go on forever. They decided to filibuster. We'd already had it passed in the House. We worked in the House to pass it. The Republicans filibustered this common sense piece of legislation that was supported by the ABA, even offered to fund it. The American Bar Association offered to fund it. So we ended up with 57 votes. We needed 60 to break the filibuster. We lost the legislation, but we have brought that issue out where it's legitimate to sit there and talk about, hey, isn't it kind of wrong? We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. Are we doing something wrong here? We worked on the so-called pivot to Asia. There's been a lot of talk about how the United States needs to refocus in Asia. I spent a good part of my life in East Asia and Southeast Asia as a journalist, as a business person, as a military person, as a government official. When I got to the Senate, I brought my staff together, again, on our staff, rather than on the committee, although I eventually was able to have the chairmanship of the East Asia Subcommittee on Foreign Relations. But I said, for the good of our country, we focus on our relationships with Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, and change the formula in Burma. In '09, I led the first delegation into Burma by an American leader in 10 years. Met with the leadership of their military junta. I was the only person ever allowed to meet with General Tan Shui. Met with Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Prize winner. We broke the ice, changed the formula of the relationship with Burma, and also we started bringing Burma out of the isolation that it had been in 20 years in a march toward democracy. I think most people here know how strongly I opposed the war in Iraq. I wrote the first article in a major newspaper about the invasion of Iraq and why strategically it was such a bad idea 5 months before we invaded in the Washington Post. I strongly believe we do not belong as an occupying power in that part of the world. We have national security interests in that part of the world, but you don't take a hornet's nest out by sitting on it, and that's essentially what we're trying to do. At the same time, because of my family tradition, my son dropped out of college and enlisted in the Marine Corps and fought in Ramadi during some of the worst fighting of the Iraq War in '06, '07. And finally, on the issues of economic fairness and social justice, I put this issue on the table as best I could when I gave the response to President Bush's State of the Union address in '07. Harry Reid, who had been very helpful to me during the campaign and also helping with the GI Bill, called me one day and said he wanted me to give the response to the State of the Union. I said, okay. And he gave me what I was supposed to say, and I said, I can't say that. And so I wrote my personal response myself, and the first issue that I put on there was that we are in danger in this country of seeing a strata of people at the very top move away from everyone else. This is not two Americas, which is what John Edwards was saying when he was running. This is three Americas. And the America in the middle, the people who are carrying the workload, doing the daily jobs, and the small business people in this country are paying too high a price compared to the people at the very top. When I graduated from the Naval Academy, the average corporate CEO made 20 times what the average worker made. When I was running for the Senate today, it's more than 300 times. And that's not a global phenomenon. If you look at Germany and Japan, the average corporate CEO makes about 10 times, 10 to 11 times what the average worker does. If you take a look, if you want a snapshot of what our challenge is, and this is a challenge that, if it's going to be addressed in this country, can only be addressed by the Democratic Party. If you take a look at March '09, remember when the economy crashed right before the '08 election? It started to come back. You take the numbers from March '09 to today, the stock market has almost tripled. It has gone from a little over 6,000 up to almost 17,000. Who is benefiting from that? What do you have to benefit from that? You have to have assets. You have to have capital that you can invest into stocks. And if you have capital, if you have assets, or if you're a corporate CEO on a profit-sharing basis, you're doing pretty well since that economy started turning around. But if you're working for a salary, and you're paying all your money into your house, and your clothes, and your car, and your food, you don't have the money to invest. And if you look at wages since '09, they actually have gone down by every indicator. There's a good article in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago about how average wages for the 80% of the people in this country have actually gone down since that period. Small businesses, the same way. Small businesses should be listening to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party should be listening to small businesses. There was a front page article 2 days ago in the Wall Street Journal that showed loans to companies businesses, loans to small businesses, $1 million or less, have declined since '08. They've actually gone down, while they've gone down about 18%, as I recall. But overall loans to businesses have gone up. The loans have been going to the larger companies as the risk level for banks has been probably factored into what the small businesses are doing. Those areas should be the central focus of the Democratic Party now into the coming years. That's about as quick a thumbnail I can give. I actually should say that I have great concerns about the use of presidential authority. I said the same thing to President Obama as I said to George W. Bush. There's too much power going over to the presidency, particularly in terms of foreign policy, when to decide to use military force without coming to the Congress. And Libya is the classic example of that, not Iraq 2 weeks ago. The decisions that were made to use military force in Libya when we had no treaties, no Americans at risk, no Americans under attack, and a situation that was internal to the country. I spoke many times on the Senate floor and in hearings about that. I'm going to stop right there. This is a very sophisticated audience. I know I'm in Iowa. I don't know how many people you get to listen to, but I'll stop there and take questions if you want. Yes.
As a physician, and as I told you, my sister served in Vietnam, I'd like to know about your views of health care for veterans, given the things we've heard about the veterans hospitals.
Let me, on the issue of the VA and health care, my starting point really is the time that I began working as a committee counsel on the House Veterans Committee, right after I finished law school, 1977 to 1981. I say that because I was very fortunate to be mentored by World War II veterans who were true professionals when it came to veteran services and Title 38, the whole law that governs it. And I learned a lot of lessons at their hands. And there are always questions about quality of care in the VA system. There were questions then. The concern that I have right now is not quality of care. I think quality of care has really improved since the late 1970s. It's access to care. And not just care, it's access to benefits as a whole. I was stunned when I came to the Senate in '07. I was on the Veterans Committee. I was stunned to learn that the backlog for adjudication of cases, even before you get into medical care itself, was 600,000 veterans. 600,000 veterans were waiting for adjudication. When I left the Senate, 900,000 were waiting for adjudication. And there are reasons for this. I mean, on the one hand, there are 3 reasons for it. On the one hand, we're seeing Vietnam veterans moving out of their career paths and needing to rely more on the VA. The second is the 9/11, post-9/11 veterans. There are more of them, and they're needing care and evaluation of their claims as well. Combined with those two is how complicated the process can now be, the adjudication process, as opposed to before. But the number one reason, and I say this with regret, and I was saying that a couple of years ago, is when you have a situation like that, you have a leadership question. If you are running an organization like the VA and you see the claims, the backlog go up like that, you need to put your leaders on the problem. The problem is big, but you can work the data on that and fix the problem. And the turmoil of the past several months, I think, has helped people understand that this problem needs to be on the front burner and it needs to be fixed. And hopefully, with the new director of the VA, we can see that. Yes, you were.
Comment on climate change?
I think we are doing a good job in this country in terms of addressing all the issues that go into that, not just climate change, but air quality, water quality. We're way ahead of the rest of the world. Here's where my concerns are. this is not being done in the global community. I'm a data dink, you know, I pick up like The Economist World Fact Book, and you know, I love reading that kind of stuff. Take a look at that and see that it probably hasn't changed since the last time I looked at it. The 20 most polluted cities in the world are either in China or India. And unless we can encourage them to adopt the same kind of standards that we have right here, we're not going to solve the global problem. Yes.
It's refreshing to hear someone speak in a substantive way about the issues. I appreciate that and appreciate your coming. What would the Webb doctrine be on the use of military force or intervention if you were to design the Webb doctrine?
Honor your treaty commitments. Clearly state your national security objectives. And I'm going to elaborate on this on the second point before I move forward. If we are not articulating clearly what our national security objectives are, the American people cannot support what they grow like they say we're war weary. They get disenchanted with where our military is. Our allies don't understand what we're doing. Our potential adversaries can't calibrate what we're doing. That's kind of where we are now. But, make clear to your friends that our allies, we have national security or security alliances around the world. Clearly state our national purpose, and in terms of elective wars, go to the Congress. I elaborate, but I think those three need to be said. Yes, sir.
Your view of the United States' relationship to Israel?
Israel is our vital ally in that part of the world. I think that the challenge right now with the situation with Israel and in Gaza particularly is which way the Israeli leadership thinks they need to go in the short term. Is this something that can only be managed? Is this crisis that can only be managed, or is there a chance that they can reach an accord that will reduce the sorts of things that we've seen? I believe it is legitimate for the Israeli government not to formally address Hamas. And other than that, you know, we're seeing potentially some changes with the mediation of Egypt as an arbiter in terms of attempting to solve that problem. Yes, sir.
You have a lot of expertise, as you said, in Southeast Asia. What do you think about the United States' relationship with China, who holds so much of our national debt, but whose economy is growing much faster than ours, and particularly with respect to their relationship with Japan and how that's been?
The issue with China and Japan I've written about extensively over the years. One of the things that I have written about and have held hearings on is the Chinese incrementalism in terms of, in military terms and in diplomatic terms in East and Southeast Asia particularly. Japan is our #1 ally in that part of the world. But when you look at East Asia and Northeast Asia, the starting point is this. Northeast Asia is the only place in the world where direct interests of three great historic powers intersect: China, Russia, and Japan. And what we have been able to do since the end of World War II is to provide a stabilizing force for the region. We've become the essential ingredient in terms of stability. The power structure of those three countries has alternated over the centuries. Japan in World War II, it was the Soviet Union when I was in the Pentagon in the 80s. Now it's China. But we are the stabilizing force in that part of the world, which so much of our commerce, not just with China, as you mentioned, so much of our commerce moves through that part of the world. China, particularly in the South China Sea areas, if you follow what's going on in the Senkaku Islands and Vietnam, China has been declaring issues of sovereignty out in these waterways. These aren't just tactical spats. They're long-term view of China that they believe they own these territories as a part of their national borders. Senkaku Islands, halfway between China and Japan. I don't know if you follow this, but it's kind of a funny story. When I was running for the Senate, our last debate that I had with my opponent in October, we were allowed to ask each other one question at the end of the debate. And so I asked him, what do you think we should do about the Senkaku Islands? In the media room, all the computer lights went on, and people Googling, what did he say, what's that word? But it was a legitimate question. He was on the Foreign Relations Committee, and in April 2010, this issue blew up. What you're seeing in the Senkakus, the reason I mentioned it because you asked about Japan, is the Senkakus, if China were to gain sovereignty over the Senkakus, what they really want is Okinawa. They want the Ryukyus. And they have never agreed that the Ryukyus are part of Japanese sovereign territory. So we need to communicate directly with China through our alliances with the second-tier countries that we are not going to yield on issues of sovereignty. We need to work with them economically. We are strong economic trading partners with them. And we need also to understand that we are two fundamentally different systems of government. We don't see this often enough in the analysis of the media reports. China is the least transparent government in that entire region other than North Korea and Burma by a lot of studies. So we can't pretend that since we're both big, we're pretty much the same in terms of how we deal with the rest of the world. Yes, sir.
Because on Libya and the Webb doctrine, and a lot of people have an opinion on Syria in terms of what we should have done or what we should do. And Thomas Friedman talked about it a little bit too. What's your opinion on what we should have done and where we're going with this?
Okay, first let me say, if you want a doctrine, I'll work on a doctrine. A reaction, not a doctrine. And any doctrine should be very carefully. Syria, your questions about Syria? I was very opposed to the notion of taking any action in Syria. And one of the things that really clarified that part of the world for me was being a journalist in Beirut. During the time the Marines were there, back in the 1982-83 period, they put the Americans, the British, the Italians, and the French in as an international peacekeeping force just to try to separate out the warring factions, the Israelis and Palestinians particularly. But on any given day in Lebanon, there are like at least 5 different factions going at each other during this period. You had the Druze, you had the Christian Flynn, you had anyway, you had like 5 of them. And I was on an outpost one day with a Marine platoon, and a Druze unit started shooting at a Lebanese army unit, which was right below us. And this expanded to the point that there was some other militia we didn't even know started joining in. The Syrians came over one hill and they were shooting down, and this Marine turned around to me and said, "Sir, never get involved in a 5-sided argument." Syria would be Lebanon on steroids. And that's one thing I was attempting to say in the Armed Services Committee hearings and the Foreign Relations Committee hearings. When people say that we should have armed the pro-democracy movements in Syria, who were they? How do you validate it? How do you validate where those weapons would go, even if you give them? That's one of the problems with Libya. I was saying during the time of Libya, I would have the State Department witnesses there, and I'd say, wait a minute, do we recognize the government of Libya? Yes. We diplomatically recognize the government of Libya. Yes, and we're going to blow them up. You know, what happened when we blew them up? Weapons, armories throughout Libya were ransacked. Weapons systems spread throughout that region. That's what you would see if we did that with Syria. I think one of the mistakes that was made with respect to Syria was, since our debate was so vocal on this, there was some encouragement from anti-Assad to anti-Assad forces that caused them to take risks that probably were not prudent given the situation. Yes, sir.
Given the expansionism of Vladimir Putin's Russia, what are your thoughts of strengthening an American presence in the Baltic states and Poland and the Czech Republic, somewhat neglected areas of NATO? What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I think we're probably fortunate that we did not put or accept some of these countries into NATO when the proposal was being made 5 or 6 years ago. Or because once you bring countries into NATO, they are an ally. When in reality, a number of the countries that were brought into NATO are basically protectorates rather than allies. And if they are NATO members, then you're obligated by treaty, rather than making a decision about it. The situation with respect to Ukraine now and with what Putin is doing, first, this is a time for Europe to clarify its relationships. I think you're seeing a good bit of that. And I think there's a good chance that Putin has overplayed his hand, and that we may end up with a better situation than we thought. At the bottom of this, if you look at Russia, it's probably oil. They need to keep the oil prices high. That's how they're financing their whole economy right now. I think that the president has played the Ukraine situation right. Yes, sir.
As a veteran and one who I'm sure watched closely to what happened to John Kerry and the swift boating of his record as a veteran, tell us what you think about what might happen to you personally if you were to throw your hat in the ring, and how do you think candidates such as yourself should respond to smears of that sort?
Any campaign is going to have negatives based on something that was the negative that people thought would work with John Kerry. I don't think it's like a pattern of any sort, quite frankly. So, any candidate in a major election is going to have to go through something like that. It's just the fact of life in American politics. What you would hope is that people will support the good that you've done, and that it's one thing I said, like running for the Senate, I wanted to stay on the message of what I'd done in my life and how I wanted to see the country go, and it wouldn't be any different. Yes.
Are you considering a run for the presidency? Everyone is wondering that, so I thought I'd ask a question.
Well, I'm here, I'm helping a couple of candidates, and I'm really interested in hearing your views on this.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all again for coming. Thanks again to Senator Webb. Please stick around, eat, drink, have a conversation, be merry. Thank you very much.